If you don't love wrapping gifts with wrapping paper, then you are going to love these adorable, easy to make drawstring gift bags. The best thing about this project is that it only takes one fat quarter and some ribbon. Now, if you make these bags with one fat quarter and the ribbon, the lining of the bag is going to be the same as the main fabric on the outside of the bag. But if you do use two fat quarters, you'll be able to make two bags and you will have a main outside fabric that is different than the lining fabric, and it'll just give it a little more fun jazz to it. Now, I did them so that I could get two bags and they are kind of opposites of each other. So, so cute. Right here, right away, before you go grab some fabric and get started with me in this tutorial, I do want to give you the first tip throughout making these bags. And that is that you won't want to use directional fabric. If you see here, this fabric is absolutely adorable. It has some Christmas trees on it and they're all facing upright. But the way this bag is constructed is that on the other side here, you can see they're all upside down. So directional fabric is not your friend when it comes to making these drawstring bags in the style I am showing. Now, one more quick thing before we get started. I am going to show you how to make some cute handmade gift tags for these bags as well. And you probably already saw it when I was showing the first bag. They are absolutely adorable, so make sure you watch till the end of this video so I can show you how to make these. You will not believe how quick they are, and you'll get to use up some of your cute Christmas fabric scraps. Now, to make this bag, you'll need your fat quarter and some ribbon. I cut my ribbon to 30 inches. So I have two pieces of ribbon here that are 30 inches. Now, another tip I want to give you right away, and that's with selecting your ribbon, is that I did not find glitter ribbon to work really well with this project. It was really hard to feed through the casing that holds the ribbon. It got caught on each other because of the texture. So if you want this to be a quick and easy project, I would avoid some glitter ribbon. Now, I also found that the best ribbon for this project was kind of more of a rope ribbon. This works lovely. It's easy to tie and the bow looks so cute on this one. I'm not great at tying bows, but the fabric ribbon here was also really easy to use and turned out really nice. Now, you can also find these kind of plastic feeling ribbons, and while it was cute and had little snowflakes on them, they did kind of shred along the edge when I fed it through the casing for the ribbon. So just keep that in mind. You'll also want to consider the width of your ribbon. When I'm telling you to mark out your casing in this project, I'm giving you a 1/2 inch. If your ribbon is wider than that, you'll want to make sure to make the casing that you mark wider for the ribbon that you chose. All right, so let me show you how I cut my fat quarter. This makes it so easy. I just take it, fold it in half. I'm gonna line it up on my mat right along a line, and then I'm going to grab a straight edge and a rotary blade. So I'm just going to square up one side of my fabric. So I'm just going to line it up on a line and cut. All right, and I'm wanting this fat quarter to come out at about 16 inches wide. So I'm moving the fat quarter over to the 0 line on my mat, and then I'm going to cut at 16. Now I'm going to cut the fat quarter in half at 8. So I'll have two pieces that are 8 inches wide. Now I'm wanting these two pieces to be 20 inches long. So since they're already folded in half, I'm just going to leave them in half. It'll just make it easier. And I'm going to cut off the tops of them. So we're leaving the fold open. I know you can't really see on here what I'm doing. There we go. We're going to leave the fold untouched because we want that to stay. That's what makes this a very quick project. So the fold is over here at the 0 line, and I'm going to cut off at 10. And you can see I'm lining these up on the lines to try to keep everything straight. All right, so now we have our 2 pieces of fabric here. And they are the exact same. So the main piece of fabric and the lining piece of fabric for this quick version is the same. If you are going to make 2 bags and have 2 fat quarters, you'll have one that is your main fabric and one that is your lining fabric that look different. So these are now cut to 8 inches by 20 inches. A tip for you as we move forward is to mark on your main fabric where you want that ribbon casing to be right away. A tip that goes along with that is that you will want that marking to be made with something that will wash away or wear away and will also not heat erase because you don't want to accidentally press that line away. Now, I like to have a nice size ruffle on my bag. If you don't want it as big, that is fine. You can always adjust your measurements for this. But to get that big ruffle, I marked mine at 3 inches. So 3 inches down from the short side of each bag. And I'm going to kind of put a lot on here because this is chalk and it will want to erase. Now this is where the ribbon is going to go through on the bag later. And then after you get that 1 inch marking, you're going to want to mark a 1/2 inch away. And this is again, if you are using a wider ribbon, you may want to make this mark wider, 1/2 inch away from that marked line. And so that would be 3.5 inches if you want to mark from the edge of the piece of fabric. So those are your first markings that you're going to make on the main fabric. Remember, this is the main fabric. It is not the lining. And you're going to want to make those same markings again on the wrong side, but you don't have to mark all the way across the fabric this time. So you're going to mark at the 3 inch line on both sides and the 3.5 or 1/2 inch away from those marked lines. And do that on both sides. Now we're marking these markings because we are going to fold this right sides together. When we go to the sewing machine, we're going to sew to the marked line, back stitch, and then skip stitching between that 1/2 inch area and then stitch down again. And we're going to stitch that way on both sides. That leaves that opening open so that we can feed the ribbon through there. Now I'm going to add a few pins around here to keep everything straight, and then I'm going to show you how we're going to prep the lining for this bag. All right, so we have the lining for this bag and we are going to bring it right sides together. And we are just going to choose one side of it and put 2 marks that are about 3 to 4 inches apart. And then what I like to do is add some X's through there because I want to remind myself not to sew there. So why is this place wider? Well, because this is the opening in the lining that we're going to end up turning this bag through when we are finished constructing it. So that is the only marking we're needing to make on this side, so we're going to add some pins. All right, so after getting everything prepped on both the main and the lining fabric, we're going to take them over to the sewing machine and sew around them. So we're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam on the main fabric down to that marked line, back stitch really well, skip between the 1/2 inch area, back stitch at the next line, and go all the way down to the edge. You'll really want to back stitch really well in all these areas so that when you turn the bag and push the bag out in the corners that you don't open up any seams. And do that along both sides. On the lining of the bag, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to stitch, back stitch really well along one side, and then on the side that you have that marked opening, you're going to treat it just as you did over on the main fabric. On the lining, you're going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam down, back stitch really well, leave that marked area open for turning later, back stitch, and sew along down to the end and back stitch really well. You won't need to sew along the bottom of the bag, and you definitely want to leave the top of the bag open. Now you can take your lining and turn it right side out. Don't forget that you needed to leave that little opening there. If you have a turning tool, this is a nice time to grab it. You can push out the corners of the bag. Now you'll take the lining of the bag and put it inside of the main bag. Essentially here, what you want to make sure is that you have right sides together. Now you're going to take a look at your seams here. I take the seams and hold them open, line them up so they meet exactly. Then you're going to grab a pin and put it through there to hold it in place. You'll do that on both sides. And if you would like, you can put a few more pins around the bag to hold everything in place for sewing. Make sure your seams are lined up. All right, so now I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way around the bag. A tip for you here is if you're able to remove your table and fit this bag around the sewing machine to sew around, it's so much easier. So remember to do that if you are able to. Otherwise, you're going to have to do like me and just put the fabric under the foot and make sure you don't accidentally sew over both sides. So I'm just going to slowly sew a 1/4 inch seam around the opening of the bag, joining the lining and the main fabric together. After sewing around the bag, it's time to flip it and make sure everything is looking perfect. This is a good time to get that turning tool out and use it on the main side of the bag to push those corners out at the bottom of the bag. Now, before you push the lining inside of the bag, this is a good time to go ahead and sew it closed. So I like to put on my 1/8 inch foot at this time to sew along the edge to get it nice and even. All right, so after sewing that opening closed, and it is really smart if you have some matching thread to use matching thread along here, but it's the inside of the bag, so either way, as long as you get it stitched closed, it's fine. So now we're going to find that seam where we joined the lining and the main fabric on the bag, and we're going to start pushing the lining inside. I like to go to that seam and kind of run my fingers along there. It helps really straighten everything out and helps that lining and the main fabric line up nicely across the top of the bag. You can take that turning tool and push inside of the bag to make sure you get everything nice and even through there. Now you can see that the bag has come together. Everything else is just some finishing steps along here. I'm going to take an iron and press around here really well, especially pressing along the top of the bag. Once I get it nice and pressed, I'm going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch away from the top of the bag. It'll give a nice finished look. And then I'm going to top stitch around both of those marked lines for the casing. So this can be kind of tricky if your bag doesn't fit around the sewing machine arm. You just have to carefully, if yours is like mine, pull the bottom away and stitch around both of the lines. All right, now that our top stitching is done and we've created the casing for the ribbon, it's time to put the ribbon through and finish up this bag. So I attached the ribbon on to the safety pin, and then I'm just going to push the safety pin through one side of the bag, and we're going to go all the way around and come back out this same side. So just kind of push the safety pin through. You'll see it come to this side, but we're going to go all the way around to the same side that we came in. All right, so easy. If you use the right size ribbon, the right type of ribbon, it comes through very easy, especially if you have something like a safety pin to hold on to. So I even them out, and before I decide to cut it small or anything, I go ahead and tie a knot in it. This is how I like to close them up. And I may want to decide I want to shorten it after, but for right now, I want to make sure it doesn't pull out when I put the other one through. So I'm going to do the exact same thing with the other ribbon, but this time we're going to go through the other side and go all the way around and come back out the same side again. All right, so we went all the way back around, and again, we're going to tie this side off as well. All right, and so then all you do is pull both sides at the same time, and then you cinch your bag, and you have a cute little gift bag that you can use. Now, the fun thing is that these don't just need to be for Christmas gifts. You could use whatever type of fabric you want for whatever gift you want, and you can tie a little bow, add a tag to it, and you have a handmade gift bag that you could put any type of gift in you want. All right, so since these edges are looking a little frayed, I am going to cut off a fresh edge. Or this is a good time to add some fray check to the edge of them, just a little bit along there, and that will help keep them from unraveling. And then just like that, the bag is finished. If you wanted to shorten these, you can definitely cut them down shorter. I like them, have them long enough to tie a bow on the bags. So how cute and simple was that little gift bag? Oh my gosh, they come together so fast and they're kind of addicting to make. I've made so many of them now. And I do actually want to give you one more idea for how to change the look of this gift bag just a little bit. This time, I'm going to show you how to make this exact same gift bag. The lining in the main part of the bag is going to be exactly the same, but this ruffle area at the top of the bag, we're going to make it look just a little bit different. I have this cute piece of fabric that has a little bit of a border design through it, and I cut that out very carefully so that I could add it to the top ruffle. So you're going to cut the main and the lining part of the bag the exact same that you did before, 8 inches by 20 inches, but then we're just going to add a little bit of an accent fabric at the top of the bag. So you're going to need to cut 4 pieces of fabric for that. And they, for me, were about 3.75 inches by 8 inches because that was the width I needed to cut out the border strips on this panel. You could make the ruffle whatever size you want. These are about 3 inches, a little under because of the seam. If you want it smaller or larger, you could definitely do that. Now, because I'm not adjusting the size of the main or the lining fabric, this bag, of course, is going to be a little bit taller than the other bags that I showed you. And that's fine. I think you're always going to have different sizes of gifts. So with that in mind, you could use this same method that I showed you for these small bags and make even larger bags or even smaller bags if you need to, depending on the gift that you want to put inside. You'll just follow the same steps, but just have your fabrics cut to a different size to suit the gift that you're wanting to give. So for this other project, I'm still using 2 pieces of ribbon that are about 30 inches long and the same size fabrics. We're going to do the same steps, but first I am going to sew the little accent strips onto the short ends of both my main fabric and my lining fabric. So I'm just going to place them right sides together and sew a 1/4 inch seam. Now I'm going to press that seam open really well and then top stitch along the seam about 1/8 of an inch away on the side that has my accent fabric. I'm going to leave the other side alone for right now, but I'm going to measure down from the seam about 1/2 an inch to mark where my casing is, only on the main fabric. On the lining fabric, I'm going to go ahead and press that seam open too, but I'm going to top stitch along both sides. Then after that, I'm really going to follow these same steps as before. I'm going to fold the main and the lining fabric right sides together. I'm going to leave an opening on the lining fabric to turn, but I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way around. The main fabric, I'm going to sew all the way around. Well, I'm going to sew along the sides and I'm not going to sew along where the ribbon casing is going to be. So the main steps are all the same. I'm just really adding that accent on. So now that we have all these bags done, I want to show you how to make the tags for these bags. Here are some things you'll want to make your handmade gift tags. You'll definitely want some cardstock, a pencil, some scissors for paper, some scissors for precision cutting out fabric, fabric scraps, labels to trace. This paper is going to be available to download for you from me. It has some different label shapes you might like to use on it. You'll want an iron-on adhesive. I like to use Heat and Bond. I'm going to use the light here because that's what I have on hand, but if you want a heavier texture to your fabric, you can use a heavier Heat and Bond if you would like. I'm going to show you a few different ways to get these labels onto your cardstock because you can't take cardstock and just lay it over and trace. So I'm going to give you some different options depending on what you have on hand to use. One of the things if you have on hand is some freezer paper, the side that kind of has that waxy substance on one side and papery side. That will work well for tracing. If you have a Cricut, you can download this printable and use it on like your Cricut or some other machine that you may have, and it'll cut it out on cardstock for you. But like I said, I'll give you a few different ways you can transfer this design onto your cardstock. Something else, since we're using an adhesive, it's always nice to have a mat that will help protect your iron and your cutting station from the sticky glue on the Heat and Bond. Let me show you a few ways you can get your label onto your cardstock to cut out. One way that is a fun little trick that I used when I was in college and would take different drawing classes. One way to trace is to see how I scribbled around this one. Just scribble around the back side of your line with a number 2 pencil. It'll take a minute. You'll just line it up on your cardstock where you want to cut it out and then trace. You can see there it pushed that graphite, is that what it is? Lead? I don't know. It pressed that lead into your cardstock so that you have a line that you can cut out around. So that is one way that you can transfer the design. Another way, you can just cut this out and then lay it down on your paper, the cutout, and then trace around it that way. It's just going to give you a lot more cutting. This way it keeps it intact all together, and you can use this again and again. So with the wax paper, what you would do is you can lay it down and you can see through this, right? So you can see through here and see the different designs. So say you want the circle, trace out the circle. I'm not tracing very well. So you want the circle, I'm just going to rough cut this out because I don't need this big piece. And I've traced the circle on the papery side of this freezer paper. So not on the side that kind of feels waxy. That's not the side I use. I set all this stuff to the side. I have so much stuff piling up here. Now what you'll do is take your freezer paper that you traced the design on and just fuse it onto the cardstock. So you want to let it cool a little bit because that'll allow it to attach on there. And I like using this method because it will kind of stay in place. So when you're cutting, it's not moving around, right? If you just held your paper on here and cut around, it'll likely move and you won't get a nice clean cut. But if you do it this way, it'll stay in place. And then you can just cut around it. And if you trace well, you'll have a nice circle. And I'm going to go ahead and cut out the square. And so here, now I have a few different tag shapes that I can design. So I can decide if I want some backgrounds on one side and then just do a little bit of decor on the other where I'm going to write the to and from. So for the pieces that I have here that I'm probably going to want to attach to the back of the fabric, I'm going to cut them a little bit smaller. So let me see, I'll probably do 2 on here, maybe 2 on here, and 1 on here. So, and then I have some fabric here that I will fussy cut out for some specific designs on the other side of the tag. So I need to cut a piece of my fusible so I can iron all these onto it. So one side of this is kind of gluey and then the other has a paper on it. So I'm going to cut kind of a nice size piece out because I have a lot of stuff that I want to fuse on. Don't really have a big pressing area right here, but what I'm going to do is bring my mat up on here. And I want to see kind of how much fabric I can fit on here. So you see I'm putting the wrong side of the fabric toward the glue. Really, I can only get these 2 fused on right now. I'm going to lay this down, make sure it's flat across here. And this is why the mat comes in handy because all that glue overhang is going to get on the mat and not on my wool mat. It's going to get on my pressing mat, not my wool mat. And then I'm just going to fuse that onto that heat and bond. All right, and I'm going to let it cool for a little bit, and then I'm going to put these under here and fuse it on, and then I'm going to get a piece of the heat and bond and fuse it to this. So it's kind of the same steps, so I'll just meet you up with you to show you how I'm going to decorate these. All right, so this is the fun part. It's kind of where you can just start planning out what you want on what. So if I want, say, this diagonal fun fabric on the back of the square, what I would do is just trace out the square onto the paper side of the fusible and then cut it out. I'm going to use these Karen K Buckley scissors. They are slightly serrated and it will help the fabric not unravel. All right, so I would do this same process with any of these. So if I would want that fabric on here, on the other side, I would just trace around the tag and cut it out just like I did here. Now, what I will do is I will remove that paper backing. And because these are cut out by hand, I may have not put it back down the same way that I traced it. So it's always a good idea, because there's still going to be glue on here, to grab that mat and fuse it in place on there. I like to let it cool a little bit so that I make sure the glue has time to dry on there, but there it is in place. And if you have a little bit of overhang, I just trim it off after I finish decorating the whole piece. All right, so let's just continue decorating this one. So I can take a look here and see what else on my piece of fabric I might want to put on. Maybe I'll put on that little tree. I think that'll be really cute. So I'm going to use the little serrated scissors and just cut around it carefully. There's a little pink swirl of ribbon through here, so I'm going to cut a little farther out on the sides to make sure I keep those ribbons on. And you can get as close or as far away from the design as you want. It is your design. You can make it look however you want. Just going to cut it off so I have a smaller piece to manage. All right, I'm going to save that little guy. So lay that on here and see, maybe I'll just put this, because then I can just put to and from. I still need to remember to have the whole. So I can say, hey, maybe that's all I want to put on here, or maybe I want to add more. I can look at here and say, okay, there's like little candy canes I could put for little accents. There's a little snowflake. I could take out this present and add that on there. It's kind of fun just to look at everything you have that you can add on, or keep it as simple or as detailed as you want. So I could put the little tree, maybe turn them to the side a little bit, keep them lined up. Do I still have space to put to and from? All things to think about. So once I get a layout that I like, all I do is remove that paper backing. All right, because there's glue around here, I'm going to grab that mat. I'm going to make sure it's lined up the way I want it, and then I'm going to fuse it in place. All right, so how cute is that? All right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just clean up any of the overhang around here. I'm going to grab a hole puncher and cut the hole so that I can add the ribbon through to complete the tag. Just put to and from, and I had definitely enough space there to add those to make my little homemade tag. So how cute is that? And just think of how fun it is and how creative you could get with all this. I'm going to make some more tags and I'll show them all to you to give you a few more ideas, but you would just use that same process on any of the tags that you decided to cut out. All right, so here are some of the tags I made, and then you can see the one that I've been showing that is attached on to the bag already. They are so fun to make, and I think it's just a nice, fun touch to have a handmade tag made for the gift that you are giving. So there are the tags that I made. I would love to hear in the comments if you've used this method to make some tags before and what you thought of it. I think it's a lot of fun, just like scrapbooking. So I really enjoyed laying them out and planning things out with just a little bit of scrap of fabric that I had. All right, bags and bags and more bags and tags and more tags. Oh my goodness, aren't these tags just so cute? And they're actually so fun to make. It's almost just like scrapbooking. I had so much fun putting these gift bags and the tags together. Let me know if you plan to make any. Do you plan to make the tags as well? And don't forget, I did make that file available for you to go download, and you can either use my simple method for just tracing out the tags and using them that way. Or if you have a Cricut or another cutting machine, that file can also be used so that you can go ahead and have that machine cut the tags out for you. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.